So I decided to give my little small half bath a mini makeover. This decor is just old and tired, and I want to give it a fresh floral look, and I'm using an existing painting on my wall as my inspiration piece. I'm not going to switch out my cabinet. I like this one the way it opens up to have storage on one side and you can display decor on the other. And I'm not painting the walls. We're just going to use some of my existing items, making them over into some fresh new decor. So first things first, out with the old so we can bring in the new. Welcome to my channel. I hope this video inspires you to do something similar, and it is Create Day, my friends, so let's get started. My first project is quite simple. I'm using a piece of scrap wood and brushing on my antiquing stain and then wiping it back with a baby wipe just to stain the back and the edges of my board. I'm then going to paint the front of my board with white chalk paint. I'm going to decoupage a napkin on here, and I need that white background underneath it. I then take that same chalk paint and just dry brush around the edges and on the back, offloading the paint onto a paper towel and just brushing over those surfaces to give it more of an aged look. Next, I'm adding DIY's Old and Gray Barnwood Patina. I'm going to brush this on over the dry brushing that I just did, and it does not completely cover that up, it just adds to it. Once I have that all on there, I will wipe it back with a baby wipe as I did the antiquing wax. This is the napkin I'm going to use. As you can see, it's a bicycle with flowers in the basket, just like the painting on my wall. So I'm going to I cut out that center piece because it didn't have those raised, ridged edges like the edges of the napkins have. With it being in the center, it was nice and smooth. I remove the bottom ply, and then I'm going to tear around the edges so it gives it a more organic look, and it also just blends in better with your project. I'm using DIY's liquid patina for this instead of Mod Podge because the Mod Podge tends to be thicker and this napkin is really thin and fragile. I'm going to work in sections, like 1/3 at a time, laying that liquid patina on, smoothing it out. I use a sandwich bag to help get those wrinkles out, and then I can go over the edges and blend out from the center with the liquid patina. When that was dry, I sealed it with Duraclear gloss varnish. I was hoping that this would bring out those colors a little bit more because it is pretty muted. And I even thought about hand painting over those, but I thought, nah, I better not try that just yet. I'd mess it up. So once that was done, I'm taking my metallic paint in the color Brushed Bronze, and I'm using my finger to go around the edges of the board, front and back. Using a ruler and my Van Dyke brown glaze, I'm painting on some faux grooves onto the front. I did 3 lines with that Van Dyke brown glaze, and then I took some more of that and went around those edges where I had done the metallic paint, just kind of blending it in to add to it. This added some more dimension to this little piece, and once that was done, this one was finished, and here's how it turned out. The next project is probably the most involved one of all of these. I took that galvanized tin that was a Kleenex box and gave it a coat of my white primer spray paint. Now I'm going to use IOD's Juliet mold to make some roses. I'm dusting it first with cornstarch, and then I'm using up the last of my IOD air dry clay, and then I will be switching over to the DAS or DAS clay that you can pick up at Hobby Lobby. And I'm going to do this in sections and glue as much as I can of that whole piece. They were a little bit big, so I ended up having pieces break off, and I had to go ahead and glue those on separately, but it still worked out just fine. This is a really pretty mold, and once I got that out of there, I trimmed up the edges with my X-Acto knife, and now I'm going to attempt to flop this over onto my hand and add my Type Bond wood glue to it and get it onto my box. I will leave a list of all the products I used in these projects today, as well as links for the products that I can find links for. So I lay this piece on here, trim off the little piece sticking up there that shouldn't be there, and then I'm folding it around the edges and around the top, and then gluing on any little pieces that came off. And I will continue to do this with the remaining sections of that mold and keep applying my castings around this box until it's completely covered. For my base coat, I'm using Fusion in the color Parchment. I'm going to paint not only the castings, but the box itself in this color, and it will take me 2 coats to get the coverage that I need. Once this is dry, I can start with the painting of the castings, and I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to use more of a watercolor type method on this. I am mixing burgundy with a dark brown, I think it's called Original Burnt Umber, to give a base coat onto my flowers of a darker rosy red color. What I mean by like a watercolor type technique is I'm watering down all these paints, and I'm not being real meticulous about hand painting everything like I normally would. So here I'm going in with the base coat of green. So all these colors are going to be watered down, and I'm just loosely painting them over, not worried about if one color touches another or anything like that. We're just going to blend these kind of all together. They're still somewhat transparent because of the paint being watered down, so you can layer your colors over without covering up previous colors. And it goes a lot faster and kind of gives it a unique look. So it's just something, if you haven't tried it, you might want to try this. The next color I'm using is called Hot Pink, but I'm going to mix it with this coral color so that it's not a bright pink. It's kind of in between coral and pink. And again, watered down, going over all that reddish color that I did on the flowers and on the buds. And I'm going to go back and forth between the flowers and the leaves, adding more colors to them and layering those colors watered down until I get the look that I'm happy with. With some of the colors, I did use a baby wipe to dab off any excess just to get it to blend a little bit better. Now with that done, I'm taking some salt wash and mixing it into my Fusion Parchment paint. And I'm going to be stippling this, well, not really stippling, but brushing and stippling around the castings first to fill in any little gaps that I have. And then I'm going to just kind of smush this with that little brush. I'm going to kind of smush it around on the flat parts of the box to give it some texture that it almost has a wood grainy look to it, because then I'm going to be applying some Grunge glaze, which will attach to that texture, and it gives it a really neat look. Now that it's dry, I can apply my Grunge glaze. I'm going to brush this on in all those little small areas first with a small brush, and then I can move to the bigger portions of the box. And I'm not wiping this back, I'm just brushing it on and letting it be. You can see here how that glaze has just attached to that texture, and it just looks so pretty. One of my final steps here, I'm using a very light pink called Conch shell, and I'm going to sponge this very lightly over the high points of all my flowers. It gives some little highlights, and I will do the same with the leaves with a couple of different colors of green for those. For the leaves, I'm mixing these three colors to get this kind of different shade of green than what I've been using. I'm very sparingly applying this just to add a little bit more shading variance on those leaves. And then I will go over them with a lighter version of green to do the highlights. The final step is a coat of my polyacrylic clear gloss, and here's how it turned out. I absolutely love this little bathtub I picked up at the thrift store. It's in perfect condition and just needs a little makeover. So I'm going to clean this up and give it a coat of my white primer spray paint. When that was dry, I gave it a coat of semi-gloss in the color Ivory Beige. I'm going to use a transfer from IOD's Ephemeral Melange. I'm going to cut out this one that has the little roses on it, and then I can trim it down the way I want it to fit onto the side of my bathtub. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove all the text, and then I'm also going to trim up one of the flowers and add that one separately so that I can layer it underneath the other flowers. I'm figuring out my placement here. I want that flower on the right to go underneath a little bit so that I layer the other one over it. So once I have it in place, I'm going to transfer that on with that transfer tool, burnish it with the carrier sheet, and then apply the other transfer, the rest of the roses. Do the same thing with that, and then I can apply the text that I wanted to keep for this particular piece. I think this turns out so cute. I think it might be my favorite, and it's probably the simplest project I did in this video. I end up setting this up with a bar of soap that I cover, and then I put a little miniature towel to drape over the side of the tub. I think it turned out really cute. Let me know what you think. For that bar of soap, since it's quite yellow, I'm going to wrap it first in some bakery tissue, just taping it on, trimming off the ends, and folding it in and taping it down with some Scotch tape. That way when I put my other piece of tissue paper on, the yellow won't show through quite as much. So now I'm going to cut a piece of Tim Holtz Ideology collage paper in botanical, cut a piece down to fit around that bar of soap, and then I'm just taping that on over the same way I did the bakery tissue. To add a little bit of color to this, I'm picking out a sticker from this pack I got from Temu, some vintage roses, and I'm just peeling off that backing and then placing that sticker on the top left-hand side of that bar of soap. With that all complete, I can place it in my little bathtub with a piece of drop cloth that I cut down to make a mini towel out of. And this one is complete. For my next project, I'm taking this old frame, it's just a plastic frame, removing the staples that are still stuck on the inside of it, and I'm going to trace out the inside of this on cardboard. It's a cardboard box that hasn't been used. I'm just tracing around that inside edge, and then I'm going to use my utility knife to cut that rectangle out. It's a perfect fit, so time for paint. I'm using Rust-Oleum's white primer for this, and since I had it out, I decided to go ahead and give the Relax sign a coat of this as well. I'm going to be using these two pieces together, so I'll be working on them at the same time. So now back to the cardboard. It's time to do some decoupage. I just took my matte Mod Podge and I'm brushing that all over the top surface. I'm going to let that dry and then apply this decoupage paper I got from Amazon. I've had it for quite a while. And since it had a lot of creases in it, I went ahead and took my little craft iron and gave it a good ironing to smooth it out as best I could. When the Mod Podge was dried, I laid this out, finding out where I wanted my pattern to be, kind of centering it. And then I can grab that craft iron and a piece of parchment paper to put over it first so that I don't have any of that glue coming back through onto my little craft iron. And I'm going to iron this until it's well adhered. I trimmed off the bulk of the excess and then went around and trimmed the edges up just a little bit closer, just leaving a little bit of overhang so that none of that whiteboard would show through once I got this back in the frame. With that done, I'm going to do a top coat of DIY's liquid patina. For the frame, I'm painting it with Rust-Oleum's Hammered Dark Bronze. This is a really pretty metallic paint. It has some texture in it and it's not too shiny. I'm using Fusion paint in the color Cashmere to paint my relax sign. With that dry, I'm taking archival ink in the color Pebble Beach, and I'm stamping up my crackle stamp from IOD's Vintage Textures stamp set, and then blotting off with a paper towel first so that I don't get a really dark impression of the ink. I want it to be somewhat faded. And the only problem I had with this is I have that one spot right up there on the top of the R on the left. It was blue. And this happened to me one time before, and I don't know what caused it. I tried going over it twice with just restamping it with that ink, but that didn't work, so I ended up having to repaint that little section and then restamping it. The rest of it turned out fine. I go all over the word and then across the top or the front portion of the stand. So here's where I'm repainting that so I can restamp it. The only thing I can figure is that there must have been some blue on there that didn't get cleaned off, but that would have been several months ago, so I'm not really sure what happened there. But this worked just fine. I used that same stamp pad to go over the hard edges on the base and the letters, but it didn't show up very well. So I switched that out for some of my Spanish copper rub and buff, applying that with just the tip of my finger. I felt like this needed a little definition around the edges to make it look more finished, so that's why I did this step. I'm going to attach that decoupaged piece of cardboard into my frame with some hot glue. I'm attaching the relax sign to the base of that frame with the hot glue as well. And then that way these two pieces will stand together. The frame wouldn't have been able to stand up just on its own. So this worked out perfectly. And here's how this one turned out. My next project is this cute little bucket I picked up at the thrift store. I am going to clean this up and give it a coat of my Rust-Oleum Satin Espresso spray paint. When that was dry, I did a coat of that same hammered dark bronze that I used on the picture frame. I'm going to be hanging this piece, so I'm taking a small drill bit and making 2 holes on either end of the back side. I didn't have any floral foam, so I found some styrofoam that was fairly thick. Not thick enough, I had to cut out 2 pieces, but I just traced around the bottom of that bucket, cut them out so that they would fit fairly well, and then I hot glued the 2 pieces of styrofoam together. I did not hot glue this into the bottom because I may want to switch this out later on. So I have my 2 pieces glued together. I'm going to paint these with a green color of chalk paint so that if you can peek through down in between my floral arrangement, you won't see a stark white styrofoam looking back at you. Now it's time for making my little floral arrangement. As you may know, this is not my area of expertise. I just picked out some things that I thought would be the color scheme and the look that I wanted. And I'm going to cut these off as needed and start placing them into my foam. Now, because this was styrofoam and not floral foam, it was a little more challenging to get those pieces down in there. But overall, I think it turned out pretty well and I'm happy with it. I thought I was going to need some moss of some sort to cover up that styrofoam, but I ended up filling this in so full I did not even need that. Now, once I had this all filled in to my liking, I took some little translucent fabric butterflies from Temu. I used 3 of them, putting one each on some of the different flowers. And I didn't get footage of that. I thought my camera was on, but it was not. But if you look closely enough, I think you can see them in the final photos. So to hang this, I added little S hooks through those holes I drilled. I painted those with that same hammered paint because I'm going to hang this from that towel rack. And in order to keep it from dropping down, I'm using an old curtain rod support that you would use like in the middle of a long curtain rod. I attached some magnets to the back of that, and I'm using a little clear protector pad because that piece is going to be resting against my wall, and that way it won't mark it up. These are the magnets I use. They are very strong and held this on nicely. Here's how this one turned out. This next one is super simple. I've got these 3 little glass bottles that I thrifted. I cleaned them up really well, and now I'm going to add some things inside of them. For the first one, I'm using Epsom salt. I'll take my funnel and fill this up about halfway, one little scoop at a time. I picked out 3 of these little flowers that I got from Temu, and using my hemostats, I'm going to place those in there and then adjust them so that I have them in the position that I like. Put the cork back in, and this one is done. For this bottle, I am using some dried lavender. I got this off of Amazon, and if it's still available, there will be a link below in my description box, so be sure to check that out. It was a little more difficult getting the lavender through the funnel, but I did discover that if I tilted it sideways, that was helpful. And I filled this one up approximately half full as well. Put the cork in it, and that one's done. For my last one, I'm using sand. I'm going to be mixing in some pink glitter and some iridescent glitter, and then pour this in. I thought about trying to do layers, but I just wasn't sure with the glitter if that would work with the sand. So I ended up just incorporating both of these. And don't do it in a dish like this and then try to add that. It got all over the place. What happened is I had mixed it up in a small cup, plastic cup, but I had overfilled it. So I dumped it out into this bowl and I ended up with it all over the place. So after that, I did smaller batches in my little plastic cup and used that to go through the funnel. And once I had that as full as I wanted, put the cork in it, and that one's done too. Now to tie in that little black pencil holder that was on the top of the cabinet, I painted it with that hammered bronze and then just put these little battery operated tea lights in there. It's really easy to just pull them out, turn them on or turn them off, and put them back into place. With it being high up on that cabinet, you won't see the little battery pack. Well, my upcycles are all complete. All that's left is to put them in place in the bathroom and see how this turned out. I did reuse those little rolled up washcloths as well as the little 2 pots that had greenery in them. I added a fresh hand towel that I picked up from Amazon, went out to my backyard and cut a fresh rose. Then I cleaned up my soap dispenser and filled it with clear soap instead of blue. And that little jug with the flowers in it, I'm keeping on hand for when I don't have a fresh flower to sit in that space. So let's quickly take a look at the before and then the after. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you find my content useful and will like and subscribe to my channel. But more importantly, I hope I've inspired you to go create something. See you next time.